Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis Legacy. Sorority secrets of the goddess next door are revealed in this all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis Legacy in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. In a previous video, I talked about how Maury Povich was retiring after 31 years on the air, producing content that promoted all sorts of American dysfunction. Now, I want to talk about the history of your American talk show and how we got into this era of trash TV and how we're going into an era of trash YouTube content. Now, your trash TV started out with your Oprah Winfrey in the 1980s on her Oprah Winfrey Show. And on the Oprah Winfrey Show, she started out promoting a narrative of dysfunction regarding black men, where she presented the black man as the image of sexual predation, the image of sexual deviancy, and the image of being a womanizing, cheating cad who had no regard for women at all. And as she promoted this misandristic narrative and got huge ratings, others started to enter into the trash TV dumpster, such as Morton Downey Jr. Now, your Morton Downey Jr., he was the one who escalated the trash TV from Oprah Winfrey's anti-black narratives to promoting political dysfunction. And as your Morton Downey Jr. came on with his really surly attitude and nasty tone, he escalated things because he started using foul language, and he would oftentimes argue and confront many of his guests, and he would also argue and confront those in the audience. And he created this hostile environment which provided a lot of fuel for the fire for many of these trash TV episodes that he had on his show. And this also led to big ratings as related to WWOR-TV, a local channel. And as this behavior escalated, there were fights on your Morton Downey Jr. show between your Roy Innis and many others, and this was one of those things that led to further big ratings. Now, the trash TV era continued on from Oprah Winfrey and your Morton Downey Jr. to guys like your Richard Bey. Now, your Richard Bey ran a show called 9 Broadcast Plaza here in New York, and this 9 Broadcast Plaza was basically a news show. But as things went on and he started to see Oprah Winfrey getting the big ratings and seeing your Morton Downey Jr. get big ratings, he also came in with more trash content. Now, the Richard Bey's trash content was oftentimes featuring your strippers and featuring all sorts of dysfunctional people, and this created a circus-like environment because his was a show that first created the circus environment for a talk show, and this was what led to big ratings for him, and it got more and more absurd. Now, the fourth member of the foundation of trash TV was Geraldo Rivera. Now, your Geraldo Rivera was a respected journalist at one time, busting open the Willowbrook scandal in the 1970s, I believe, and he was known for producing hard news. But when hard news was not making him any sort of money, and he had been embarrassed by the whole Al Capone vault debacle in 1986, I believe, he then got his own talk show. And when he first started out, he started to try to do substantive issues, but once he saw that that wasn't really pulling the numbers, he then turned into trash TV by going out here and bringing up neo-Nazis and Ku Klux Klansmen. And in one episode, this led to an incident where there was a big fight between these neo-Nazis and these pro-blacks, and that led to a chair being thrown and Geraldo Rivera getting his nose broken. But as this circus went on from the 80s with the 4 pioneers of trash TV, your Oprah Winfrey, your Morton Downey Jr., your Richard Bey, and your Geraldo Rivera, others started to enter into the arena. And those included your Maury Povich, who started out with the Maury Povich Show, but then as the trash TV era entered, we started to see him turn into Maury, and we started to see more trash topics. Now, other hosts came in, like your Sally Jesse Raphael, your Phil Donahue to a point, and then others like Ricky Lake and Jenny Jones. And all of them used to get big ratings by putting on the most dysfunctional people and showing off the worst side of America. And as they showed off the worst side of America and put America's dysfunction on display, it basically became like a complete circus. Now, a lot of people, again, they want to say that Jerry Springer opened up the whole circus-like atmosphere, but the circus-like atmosphere started with Richard Bey, and then your Jerry Springer copied Richard Bey's format and then went on to make it one of the big things of his show in the 90s. But all of these shows, they created this whole era of trash TV where we got to see the worst aspects of American life presented, and oftentimes when they would go out here and present the worst aspects of American life on TV screens for Americans to watch, most people thought, oh, that's just one group of individuals. However, it was meant to try to present a view of America that was to promote a narrative that in many cases was very anti-black, because a lot of times the guests that they would start to feature on these shows over time were mostly black people, and they wanted to show the worst aspects of black life to all of America, to say that this is how black people behave. Now, yes, they had some white people here and there, or some Hispanic people here and there, but the majority of the audience that they would show on their shows as guests was predominantly black people. And again, that's deliberate by design, because they wanted to promote black dysfunction as a social norm. And as many kids of the 90s grew up watching these shows, they learned that black dysfunction was a way of life. Now, the trash TV era really got crazy in the late 90s, and I remember when your Jerry Springer had a show where a woman practically had all of her clothes torn off, and that was a one that led to big ratings, and things were getting so crazy on these shows that I remember one time, on a Jenny Jones, a guy wound up talking about he was revealing his crush on another man, and this led to one man being murdered. Now, things were really getting out of control on a lot of these talk shows until about 1999, I believe, when we had the Columbine mass shooting. And when we had the Columbine mass shooting combined with the gay lover murdering the man who revealed that he was gay and had a crush on him, that's when trash TV started to tone itself down. That's when we started to see Oprah Winfrey distancing herself from trash TV and wanting to go in a new direction. And that's when we also saw Jerry Springer trying to get out of the sewer and trying to tone down a lot of the fights and the violence that was transpiring on his show. And as the 2000s went on, trash TV was still trashy, but the whole thing was they toned it down to a point where they could continue to get ratings until TV started to go digital around 2009. Now, when TV decided to go digital after the Telecommunications Bill of 1996 was passed, that's when media companies were buying each other, and once they started buying each other, that's when there were real serious problems with television as a medium, because once TV decided to go from analog to digital signals, many of these TV networks started to create these sub-channels which featured a lot of content from other eras, and what happened was TV networks started encroaching on each other. And as they started encroaching on each other for ratings, the internet was starting to grow, and as the internet started to grow in the later 2000s, more and more people were watching YouTube, and more people were watching YouTubers, and these YouTubers were out here producing content, and that content was very similar in nature to your trash TV. And what your what your YouTube offered that your TV did not offer was an opportunity to interact within the audience. And with that opportunity to interact in the chat or the comments section of a video, this gave people an incentive to go out here and watch YouTubers produce the same content over many of your talk shows or many of your court shows. And this is why in 2022, we're seeing a lot of your talk shows ending, like your Maury Povich, your Nick Cannon, your Ellen DeGeneres, your Wendy Williams. These shows are no longer cost effective for these networks anymore. And because they're no longer cost effective, what many of the networks and prodcos are doing are ending these shows. And what's happening now is the trash TV is now heading over to YouTube. And as the trash TV heads over to YouTube, we get to see dysfunction on display online. And many of these Hollywood movie studios no longer have to pay overhead to get the same trash content. No, they can get the same trash content for free, and they can go out here and make money on said trash content by going out here and putting ads in front of that trash content that they're getting for free. So they don't no longer need to go out here and pay a host to host a show. They no longer need to pay a studio or a hotel ballroom for space. They no longer have to pay to print tickets, and they no longer have to pay staff to go out here and be able to coordinate having these shows put together every day. No, they don't have to pay for any of that because they've got a whole group of YouTubers who will go out here and make this kind of content, like your Kevin Samuels, like your Cynthia G, and even your Obsidian. As long as they've got those content creators making that kind of content and presenting dysfunction on display, they can go out here and reap millions of dollars at the expense of those YouTubers and pay them pennies on the dollar on AdSense as related to ads if their channels can stay on the air. And as they're paying them pennies on the dollar, they no longer have to pay a guy like Maury Povich millions of dollars, because now they can go get these YouTubers to go out here and put on these shows, and they'll make those shows for them for pennies on the dollar, and they'll sit there and profit at the expense of those YouTubers. And as they're sitting there making these shows, talking about black women, talking about black men, having their gender wars, going back and forth in live streams that go 6, 7, and even 11 hours, they don't have to pay for putting that content on television, because they can make a lot more money on black dysfunction in these live streams. And as they're watching people arguing back and forth, they can count all of their money and make all of that money without little overhead. And as your Maury Povich gets ready to retire off into the sunset, I mean, he's already done very well for himself over the last 30 years. I mean, over the last 31 years, this man has made millions of dollars on black dysfunction, and he has profited at the expense of black people for the last 3 decades. I mean, he's had a career longer than most GM workers, and he's going to retire living very well off black dysfunction. And now YouTube is also going to profit from black dysfunction now, as they sit there and they watch all of these black YouTubers out here promote the same dysfunction that your white supremacists did when they created trash TV. And now, instead of them having white hosts go out here and put this content on the air, like a Richard Bay, Geraldo, or a Jerry Springer, they go out here and get black faces to go out here, like a Kevin Samuels, a Cynthia G, a Obsidian, or a Taz. They'll have them go out here and be the faces that promote most of the black dysfunction on display, and they'll reap all of these profits on these platforms. And while they're doing it, they'll go out here and pay these guys pennies on the dollar, and they don't have to pay for any sort of overhead as related to a production studio. They don't have to pay for any sort of staff to coordinate things. They don't have to pay for airfare to fly people out. They don't have to pay for things like just cleaning up the studio and the set. They don't have to pay grips or lighting people or camera people. No, they don't have to pay anyone. No, they profit because these guys are going to make the content themselves, put it on a live stream, and give people the same entertainment for pennies on the dollar. And while you're sitting there thinking you're getting a couple of dollars from a super chat or a cash app, the YouTube is making a bunch of money as they're getting free content and free entertainment at the expense of black people, and further being able to promote the same anti-black images and the same anti-black narratives on their platforms. And as they promote those narratives, they do it and they go out here and enrich themselves at those same content creators' expense. And again, a lot of them don't see how the game has evolved, and the game has evolved. And the sad part is, many people are so caught up in their feelings about promoting these types of dysfunctional ideas, they can't see how they have been turned from the content watcher to the content creator, and they're not the ones getting any sort of fair compensation, because Maury made millions, but black people, we sit up here, present the worst images of ourselves, and we make other people rich while we do it. And again, the sad part is that people can't see how trash TV has gone over to YouTube, and how the trash TV has become trash YouTube, and the viewers have migrated from television over to YouTube, and now all we see is trash YouTube as related to black content. And this black content clown show that started with Oprah Winfrey, her grandchildren are now on YouTube promoting the same dysfunction, and not seeing how it's led to no hope and no change for black people as related to their image in media. Now, if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to pick up some of my positive black fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, or the books of the Smith Thriller trilogy, you can find all those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them on Smashwords, the iBook Store, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. You think you've seen scares? Get ready for the horror of the Hyena Woman.